Today on the Men at the Movies podcast, we talk about The Last Samurai. We love these stories of transformation because they give us hope that we can be restored. We desire having a robust and settled disposition, a sense of inner peace and becoming content in all circumstances. But the ancient and the modern are at war for our souls, and the only way to find rest and honor is to follow the ancient paths. Put down your gun and pick up your sword, and let's discover God's truth in this movie.
The movies and stories we love are gateways to see ourselves and God in new ways.
Every great story borrows its power from a larger story, the story that's written on our hearts and woven into the fabric of our very being. Hello and welcome to the Men at the Movies podcast. My name is Paul McDonald and we're going to get started in just a minute. But before I bring Rob in, I wanted to let you guys know about some new content we have available on the website. Britt has written a 14-day devotional on The Princess Bride, and it's called You Can Be a Hero and This Is How. In this book, he takes a deep dive look at the themes of the movie, why we love it, and it's awesome. It's great. You guys should check it out. And it's available for download for free. So just go to menatthemovies.com/ebooks. Also, I've been working on a book about discovering your story in the movies that you love. The title is Unlock Your Story, How the Movies You Love Reveal the Key to Your Future. So I've got the introduction and the first chapter ready to go. And especially for our podcast listeners, we wanted to offer you some advanced content of this upcoming book. Just go to unlockyourstory.org and you'll find the download is available there. Check it out. Finally, when Rob and I recorded this podcast early in November, I had anticipated releasing this episode sometime in January. But as our conversation went along and in the days that followed, I realized this content was needed today. As we're entering Thanksgiving and Christmas and the Advent season and all this, the holidays can put so much pressure on you. The world is screaming at even back in October, the news was all about get your Christmas gifts now so you don't miss out. And this message of scarcity and not enough and move, go. And as we had this conversation and we stepped into this idea, this tension between the ancient and the modern. I felt like you guys needed this before the Christmas season started and to encourage you as you listen to help you pursue the ancient paths that we discuss so that you can find rest, contentment, and peace. So enjoy. Joining me from the other side of the globe, the other side of the day, from the future, is my friend Rob Porter. Hey, Rob, how you doing today?
Hey, Paul. Great to be with you again, my friend.
Yeah, it's always a confusing thing when we're getting together. We're like, well, what time is it where you are, where I am? And because I'm in the afternoon, you're in the morning of the next day. So, but it's all coming together, and I'm super excited to talk about The Last Samurai with you today.
Me too. Yeah, there's a lot in this film, isn't there?
Oh, there's so much. We've been talking for about half an hour already.
We've done the podcast already. Yeah.
I know. I just should have hit record earlier. And we were because there's so many different directions that we could go with this movie. If you don't know, it came out in 2003. Main guy it's got a lot of big, familiar faces. The most familiar are the two main characters of Tom Cruise, obviously playing Nathan Algren, and then his sort of the opposite side of him, played by Ken Watanabe, and he's plays the character Katsumoto, who is the last samurai. So Rob, we had a great conversation. We talked about Balian and Kingdom of Heaven. You reached out. You're like, hey man, what do you think about doing The Last Samurai? So as I like to open our podcast, Rob, why did you pick this movie?
I think this film has had a deep spiritual connection to me for a number of years, Paul. I have the soundtrack to particular clips in a playlist, and whenever I listen to it, I'm transported, or I'm reminded of some true things just about the story that we're living in. I feel like a sort of strength rise in me as I listen to it. And we'll unpack more of that as we get into the conversation. But I'm just going to read another very small quote from our friend Morgan, just to help us enter into this. And I'll get to your question to why.
Yeah.
The Father's ongoing initiation of the masculine soul has the final word, and inviting us and guiding us through this process of masculine initiation is mostly what God is up to in the life of every man. So like our last conversation in the kingdom of heaven, Balian went through this process of initiation, this radical reconstruction and returning different than before. There's a rebirth, if you like.
Yeah.
And this is kind of another one of those such stories that I'm really curious to open out with you, Paul, as to how it is that a man can be so radically transformed by going through this process, by going through this journey of excavation, a quest of sorts.
Yeah. And it wasn't a quest he asked for. It wasn't something he signed up for.
Yes.
As we were talking, we're going to sort of frame this up in a 4-section act. So section 1 is Nathan as we see him, as the movie starts. He's a captain. It's the late 1870s. He had fought the Indians, but now he's kind of on a dog and pony show, going through selling rifles, living with the shame, the regret. He drinks all the time. He's an angry man. And I think that resonates for us because we see ourselves a lot in that. Because he lives with the nightmares of his past and does pretty much whatever he can to escape it.
Exactly. Yeah, we sort of see. So this is a time as well in Japan where there's like the state, if you like, they're wanting to urbanize Japan. And there is a people of old, the samurai, who are sort of saying, hold on a minute. We're not sure about all of that. Why don't we have more conversation about it? Why don't we remember who we are as well in all of this, other countries coming in and putting their ways on our ways?
Yeah, the line they used was the ancient and modern are at war for the soul of Japan.
Yeah, that's well said.
And I think we suffer the same thing. The ancient and modern both are after our hearts and after our souls in many ways. You shared with me that this past year that you've been part of a group that have been working your way through reading through the Bible in a year.
Mm-hmm.
Which is to me, that's a very ancient way. But as you look at that, as you embraced that process, how would you describe that time as you tried to balance the ancient and the modern in your daily life?
I think firstly, it's very exposing, Paul. It's exposing on the effect of today, the effect that has on us in so many deep and profound ways, whether that's your bias towards something, whether that's your perspective or interpretation. Some of those have come from somewhere, or may have been placed on you,
right,
or something you've always known since you were born. And to be reflecting on these ancient texts has been very refreshing to the soul.
Right.
And has gotten many of us just very curious about, a bit like the samurai in a way, how do we remember what's most true in all of this? And how do we align our lives to that again. Now, when I say to that again, I don't mean like everything that happened in the Bible, but it's more, there's a tried and true path.
Yeah.
There's a way of honor and love towards another person. There's a community, there's some lost treasure that's been either stolen or lost or forgotten. And what's been really interesting is that reading through the Bible in the year has been excavating that again, remembering that again, and encouraging us to pursue that again.
And that's that battle, I think, that we see very quickly, really, in the movie, because Nathan and Omara and the Colonel all represent the modern, the new, the firepower. And we're bringing the modern world to Japan. And this idea that just because it's new, that it's better. Like they pull out, I think it was a Gatling gun, and they were like, oh, it can shoot 200 rounds a minute.
Mm.
And then late in the movie, you see it at work, and the Japanese leader who had commanded them to fire became horrified at what damage it was doing to the people around him. And as I think that a very similar mindset as Nathan was in the army and they'd gone through and cleaned out the savages, as they called them, of the Indians in the American West. And now he was doing one more thing. He was just, he was putting down another rebellion by another tribal leader.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it might be on a different continent, but it was the same fight. Fight of the modern against the ancient. Because the samurai, they said they didn't want to dishonor themselves by picking up a weapon. They used bows and arrows and swords. They didn't use firearms.
Yeah.
But the reason Nathan had been successful as a soldier was because he studied his enemy. And he began studying the samurai, saying, who are they? What makes a person a samurai?
Mm-hmm.
And then as the movie goes on, he gets captured. And he goes and they take him in because he fought valiantly. And Katsumoto wanted to know his enemy. And so they were both wanted to learn from each other, and they lived with each other over the winter.
Mm-hmm.
There's some journal entries that I think connects back to what you were saying about this process of excavation, of diving into the ancient texts, that, especially this first one where he struggles. What does it mean to be a samurai?
Mm.
Winter 1877. What does it mean to be samurai? To devote yourself utterly to a set of moral principles. To seek a stillness of your mind. And to master the way of the sword.
People can look at it and be like, oh, that sounds like mysticism. That sounds hokey. But honestly, the real thing is, as I'm sure you experienced going into this year-long journey, I don't have time for that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always on the go.
Mm. It's fascinating to hear Nathan's diary entries, isn't it? He's a man who stops to think.
Yeah.
He reflects, he writes down, he captures his emotion, his thoughts, his questions. And there's a deep connection between him and Kazumoto. Kazumoto has a dream basically with Nathan featuring in it. And so it's almost like they're bound to each other. They're intended to come together. There's an intention behind that divine encounter that both of them are changed. The old and the new.
And that's what I believe we as followers of Jesus, that's our calling, is we can't go and live in a monastery. We've got to be in the world, but not of it. We can't check out, because then we're sort of like the parable of the talents of, we've been given these gifts, but if I go hide myself away in a monastery or seclude myself from engaging with the world around me, then I'm just hiding that and wait until the master returns. And he doesn't have a good outcome. I don't want his story.
Mm-hmm.
So Nathan is gone. He's entered into this process where he's watching the samurai, how they live, how they interact. And he's finding a lot of peace in that, which he wasn't expecting, because he went in fighting them, right? In that first battle, he killed several of them, killed the brother-in-law of Katsumoto.
Yeah.
As he's letting down his guard, realizing no one's going to attack him, he finds some peace. He finds a way of life that appeals to him.
And this is a man who, like we mentioned earlier, who has lost his way. He's reckless, with low self-worth for his own life anymore. He's been crushed. He quotes here, "I don't give a damn about the samurai. I want to know my enemy. For $500 a month, I'll kill whoever you want.
Yeah.
But keep in mind, I'll happily kill you for free." This is his own kinsman who led him into some horrendous battle scenes that have left him crushed.
He says that to the colonel, right? He says, yes. I'd gladly kill you for free because you ordered me to kill these women and children in the name of process and progress and improving and modernization and whatever word you want to use. And it goes back to a quote, I think, from the very beginning of the movie, sort of narrated as the movie starts. Japan was made by a handful of brave men, warriors willing to give their lives for what seems to have become a forgotten word, honor. Because Nathan had lost his honor. He had done things that he was ashamed of. And as Katsumoto related, in war, you see things that you don't want to see. You do things you don't want to do. I think as he struggles with it, in one case, he lost his honor. And the shame of that, and the shame, for the samurai, the shame of the disgrace of defeat was a shame worthy of committing suicide. Because you couldn't live with the shame.
Yes.
But for Nathan, it was almost the shame of winning. And defeating a people who maybe didn't need to be killed, or of the shame of knowing that he had done those atrocities and trying to live with that.
It's interesting how it starts to unravel for him in this community of the samurai. He's forced to face the demons. He's waking up crying out for sake.
Yeah.
Because that's all he's known that works to numb temporarily his deep anguish and pain. He's continually just putting this plaster on that keeps being taken off. And so he's crying out. And he's like, what do you want from me here, keeping me here as a prisoner? And Katsumoto has the wisdom to say, well, what do you want for yourself? Everyone can see that he's troubled.
Right.
What do you want for yourself? He says there must be a reason that he's here.
Right. A very Holy Spirit following sounding thing. Like, I'm not sure why I brought him here. He just needed to come here and as we mentioned, came in as an enemy. And over the time, the months that they spent together getting to know each other as students of war, what was it, the poem towards the end? I know we're skipping around a little bit, but towards the end of their time, they're in this village because it's winter. The other armies can't come through the passes, so they're safe. But in the valleys, it's warm because the mountains protect the villages behind the mountains from the storms. Spring is coming. There's been actually an attack, which is why now Nathan comes to him, because he fought side by side. This was a man that he was hired to kill, right? I'll kill anyone you want for $500 a month. He was hired to kill the samurai in Katsumoto. And yet, when push comes to shove, because of his time with the samurai, seeing how they worked, he found himself transformed, and not just him, but Katsumoto. And they have this conversation as they sort of see each other for who they are for the first time.
Mm.
The perfect blossom is a rare thing. You could spend your life looking for one, and it would not be a wasted life.
Who sent those men to kill you?
I'm writing a poem about a dream I had. The tiger's eyes are like my own, but he comes from across a deep and troubled sea.
Was it the Emperor? Omura?
If the Emperor wishes my death, he has but to ask.
So was Omura.
I'm having trouble finishing the poem. Can you suggest a last line?
I'm not a writer.
Yet. You have written many pages since you came here.
What else has she told you?
You have nightmares?
Every soldier has nightmares.
Only one who is ashamed of what he has done.
You have no idea what I have done.
Areomote. You have seen many things.
I have.
You do not fear death, but sometimes you wish for it. Is this not so?
Yes.
I also. It happens to men who have seen what we have seen. And then I come to this place of my ancestors. And I remember, like these blossoms, we are all dying. To know life in every breath, every cup of tea, every life we take, the way of the warrior.
Life in every breath.
That is Bushido.
Aye.
The Emperor has granted a safe passage to Tokyo. We leave tomorrow.
Good.
Good. When I took these, you were my enemy.
They're both very like-hearted. They are warriors. One has been shown one way, one has been shown another. Nathan's realizing there's an alternative. There's perhaps a way of considering redemption here, or a rebirth, or to find some kind of peace to that troubled soul. And he's being invited to find that. He's being fathered. I wonder with Nathan, Paul, who was looking out for him that we can all connect to as men, in our society today? Who had his back? Who had his best interest at heart? Who said kind words to him? Who encouraged him? Who said, no, that's not right? It has an impact, doesn't it, on the trajectory of your life?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting when they first met and they introduced themselves and they have this little conversation. But when Nathan finally tells him his name, Katsumoto turns to him and bows and says, "It is an honor to meet you."
Mm.
That was an unfamiliar statement and emotion and response. Again, going back to that whole idea of honor.
Mm.
And you could see it on his face in that scene of, it's an honor to meet you. And he's like, I'm the enemy. I killed his brother-in-law, the husband of his sister, the father of his nephew. I am the enemy. And yet he says, it is an honor to meet me. And I wrote this down. I wrote it down towards the end of the movie. A man of honor gives hope to others.
Mm.
And in the scene, as you mentioned, offers almost a forgiveness. The redemption was the word you used. He impacts them and calls and invites them to be more, to become honorable,
Mm.
and removes their shame if they pursue honor.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And it's an interesting thing because you think an honorable man doesn't shame the other person. And you see that where, he even that Japanese word, he sends the servant away. So it's just the two men alone in this cherry blossom,
yes,
or this garden. And then he says, life in every breath.
Mm.
One of the reason that you love this movie was this transformation. You've got a broken, shame-filled, anger-filled man at the beginning.
Yeah.
To a man who knows who he is at the end, who finds life in every breath.
Yeah.
He was finding life in the bottom of a cup in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end, he knows who he is, and he is even willing to, he offers himself to the emperor. He tells the emperor, if you believe I am your enemy, tell me and I will kill myself. And it's that transformation, because a lot of us, especially in this very modern world, we look for a transformed life. We want life with every breath. But when you look at the people around you and look even at your own life, how often would you say that you find that life is in every breath?
Yeah, it's very disruptive, isn't it, Paul? And we know, I guess it's kind of living in this tension, isn't it, of the not yet.
Yeah.
Ultimately. But that there is so much more available now as well. So for me, just as you were talking there, I get hit by the tension of, come, Lord Jesus, restore this earth. I want to live with you in that place with, I'm here now, and there are choices that I can exercise to continue this holy path of transformation with God until that time comes. So like all these men that we talk about that strike a chord with us when we watch their films, as the amazing team at Wild at Heart say, God's trying to tell us things about our own story.
Yeah.
And we were talking before this call, Paul, about Paul's encounter with Jesus on the road to Damascus.
Right.
So here's this well-trained religious leader heading out on a death march against the Christians.
Right.
And he has an encounter which flipped him 180 and came back a Christ follower. Like, we're really interested, aren't we, in these stories of what happens in this time.
Yeah.
To go from that to that. We know there's no shortcuts. We know that it's some people pen it as a strenuous apprenticeship, but the richness and the beauty and the life and the breath, as you mentioned, Paul, come as a gift from that strenuous apprenticeship with God. But it was just fascinating going through this Bible in a year, seeing yet again, stories of men in the Bible and women, but just keeping it towards the sort of masculine at the moment. This transformation that Paul happens, he doesn't return the same. He's been set on a new trajectory. His power, he's powerful. He's got a lot of strength and a lot of say. And Jesus just angled it, pointed it slightly different. And now he's offering all of what his giftedness is for a force of good. He's unlearned things like Nathan. There's a whole process, isn't there, that we each must be reflective of about what is it that I need to unlearn, Father? What do I need to relearn as true? What's true here? Just these kind of curious student questions, because what you believe and how you navigate life might not be what's intended. It might be.
And that reminds me of the verse from Jeremiah 6, where he says, ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is.
Yes.
And walk in it. And you will find rest for your souls. And from another journal entry of Nathan's as he's walking with the ancient ways of the samurai, he is finding rest for his soul.
Spring, 1877. This marks the longest I have stayed in one place since I left the farm at 17. There's so much here that I will never understand. I've never been a church-going man, and what I have seen on the field of battle has led me to question God's purpose. But there is indeed something spiritual in this place. And though it may forever be obscure to me, I cannot but be aware of its power. I do know it is here that I have known my first untroubled sleep in many years.
It's huge, isn't it? I never caught this before, Paul, but I think he said at the beginning of that, since I left the farm.
Yeah.
Which indicated perhaps he owned a farm, worked the land, was in connection with, he's quite grounded. And here he is in the samurai, almost kind of being taken back to what that feels like again.
Yeah.
The people, the community of the samurai there, we'll get onto that shortly, but the way that they operate in the land and their connection to each other as people. And Nathan's he's recovering from the trauma.
Right. By almost going back into it.
Yeah. Yes.
My interpretation of that is, as a boy, he grew up on a farm and then went away and has only known war and movement ever since. And it was interesting to me because I grew up, my dad was in the military, and then I think they just got used to moving a lot. So my current house, I've lived here for 11 years. And that is over twice as long as I lived anywhere else in my life. And it's this sense where when you start moving, it's interesting, that rest for your souls. If you're constantly on the move, you're not finding rest. But like I would look at the house and it'd say, oh, this house sucks. We need a new house. But by this idea of, well, no, this is our house. This is where we live. This is where we stay. I need to fix my house. And so you start investing into the ground and say, no, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to care for it. I'm just not going to move every 2 years or something.
Mm-hmm.
You can't find rest, I guess, unless you actually rest.
And
that's part of those ancient paths, the good way.
I get triggered by just the redemptive power of love as well, Paul, because as you mentioned earlier, here he is, a prisoner of this tribal community in the home of the wife and family who he killed. And he's shown extravagant kindness. She bathes him and dresses him and stitches his wounds, feeds him, cares for him, And if that wouldn't transform somebody, I don't know what kind of would, Like here he is off this journey, like you say, of moving from one place to another, killing, to suddenly receiving this extravagant in his mind, undeserved.
And it's interesting because his nightmares were of the women and children that he killed or saw killed on the Indian lands.
Yes.
And now here he's receiving love and care from women and children who's, again, he's injured because he killed the husband and father.
Yes.
And what he finds there is not hate and anger. Remember, towards the end, he's getting ready to go to battle, and he tells Taka, the wife and the mother, and the young child, the young boy, I can't remember his name, but he gets mad because he's going to go off to battle, and he runs out, and he says, oh, he hates me because I took his father from him. And Taka said, no, he's mad because he doesn't want to lose you. He doesn't want you to go and die. He doesn't want you to go and not come back.
Yes.
I think there is that power of forgiveness that was seen because he is receiving love, care, forgiveness from the same people group, from the women and children, the same ones that he had harmed over his life. And really, I think that's the only way that we find our path through restoration and transformation, is through experiencing forgiveness.
It's interesting, isn't it, Paul? Just he was taken away from everything that he'd come to be aware of, and was put in a place where he had time to notice, to face himself, the weight of his life. He had time to pause, time to reflect. Morgan said some months ago about no one stops to think anymore. And COVID, as we all know across the globe, no one's exempt of this, sadly. At first, people were isolated in their homes. It gave you had time to stop and reflect on some things.
You had nothing better to do.
And it's just the spirit of the age is like, keep moving, get promotions, more and more and more, self sort of thing. And when you stop to think, when you carve out those precious moments that seem so hard and contended, it's like Nathan, we're reminded. I think the category of remembering is so vital, Paul, because I'm just astounded at how quickly we forget, how quickly we can forget. And I need to be reminded all day, every day of the kind of man I'm becoming, choosing to become, exercising to become, that I'm not yet. I have reminders everywhere because it's so easy to forget with the flow of the modern world,
right?
The tried and true way.
And I think that was your decision to go through the Bible and to read through it and to take that ancient path. It wasn't about, it was somewhat about reading the Bible, but it was saying, you know what? I'm choosing God over anything else for this 5, 10, 20, 30 minutes. For whatever amount of time in that day is, I'm focusing on this. I'm not racing through it to get done, because that probably was that wasn't an effective approach on those days, I'm guessing. But the days you sat and it is funny because I've said this a couple times. I enjoy sitting on the porch in the mornings with a cup of coffee. My dog loves sitting out there with me. And there's days like today where I just didn't, because I feel too busy to spend 5 minutes sitting, watching the sun come up over the hill, over the trees, to see the sprinklers come on over the grass. And there's a reason I left some of those clips with some of the pauses and the music. And And even in the pace of our recording, I felt us slow down. As you mentioned, the pace of this world is, running to and fro, faster, more. It's like a rushing river.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have to step out and say, no, you talk to people and they're talking about, hey, how you doing? Busy. Like it's a good thing.
Yeah. Yes.
Because it would be weird to say, how you doing? Man, I'm feeling really rested. And you can almost feel the envy. It's like, how dare you be rested? How dare you say you're rested?
What kind of gets in the way of you resting, Paul, would you say? Is it just like the active mind of, okay, I need to do this, I need to go here, I need to do this? How would you put words to that for you?
Pressure. I've got all these things to do. And many times it's pressure from how I anticipate other people will respond. Like if I don't do this, then my wife will be disappointed. Or if I disengage or I don't go to that meeting or that group, then I'm going to hurt their feelings, or I'm going to any one of a number of things. I was talking to my dad yesterday, actually, and he was talking about how busy he is. He's in his 60s. He's retired. He's like, I'm busier now than when I worked. And he was talking about the things that he has between now and Christmas. This is early in November, and he's talking about having something pretty much through Christmas time. I'm learning my default answer tends to be no. If somebody asks me something and presses me for an answer right then, I'm going to say no because I can't commit, because I want to make sure that this is something that I really want to do, and I'm not just doing it so that I don't hurt your feelings, or that it's something that I want to, as they said, I want to have life in every breath. I want to show up fully present and fully engaged. So that means I can't say yes to everything. That disappoints people. But I have to say, no, I need to be here for my parents, for my in-laws, for my family. If I have time, I've got a few of my closest friends. And then the rest is, I'll try to fit you in.
Yeah.
And even as vigilant as I feel with my schedule, it's still very easy to get overwhelmed.
It's so ironic, isn't it, that that's the thing we most need and want.
Yeah.
And yet it happens infrequently on the whole.
Right.
And quite rightly, you said earlier, Paul, we can't all just go and live in a monastery. So you and I are just riffing here. We're being curious together because we don't have all the answers. We're right by the listeners. We're standing next to you. We're trying to be curious and ask questions and hear from other men and to be seeking God in this. But yeah, it's a question, isn't it? It's a holy question. Like, how do we live now?
Right.
But receive breath in every moment.
I mean, that's what we want, isn't it? Life in every breath. Pastor several years ago talked about the Greek concept of time. And he said that through the New Testament, there's chronos, which is the clock ticking. Just, 24 hours a day, 60 hours, 60 minutes an hour, 60 seconds a minute. That's chronos. Kairos is that God-infused time. And that's what we see as Nathan grows and becomes transformed. He becomes much more purposeful, much more thoughtful to bring the kingdom of heaven, to bring wisdom. And towards the end, as he's getting ready to go, they're getting ready because now, after Nathan's been gone with the samurai for almost a year, now they've raised an army. They've got howitzers, cannons. They've got the Gatling guns. They wanted Nathan to lead the armies, and he said, no, and he's going to leave. He starts drinking, but he comes back because he knows where his place is. He's starting to know who he is. And so he returns with Katsumoto, and they're facing insurmountable odds. There's thousands of Japanese soldiers coming against hundreds of samurai. And again, highly equipped modern equipment versus their bows and arrows and swords. And so they're facing these insurmountable odds. And as they look over the battlefield, Nathan and Katsumoto have this, he reminds him of the Spartans at Thermopylae.
There was once a battle at a place called Thermopylae. 300 brave Greeks held off a Persian army of 1 million men. 1 million, you understand this number?
I understand this number.
For 2 days, the Greeks made them pay so dearly the Persian army lost all taste for battle and were defeated soon after.
What do you have in mind?
Take away the advantage of their guns. They're overconfident when we use that. Lure them close. Close enough for a sword.
You believe a man can change his destiny.
I think a man does what he can until his destiny is revealed.
I love that line. I think a lot of times we go chasing our destiny, but we don't know what it is.
I think what's interesting with that as well is the becoming before what you do. It was really interesting to witness when Nathan began to align his actions to what he believed. It was transformational. And it revealed who he truly was, contrasted with told what to do with his actions towards something he didn't believe in.
Right.
And I just wonder, Paul, for ourselves and for anybody who listens to this, how often that happens, whether it's a day job that perhaps you don't fully believe in, whether it's whatever, and to align your actions. I read a book a while ago called Atomic Habits.
It's a fantastic book. It's great.
Great book. And a piece that caught my attention among many pieces was identity-based habits.
Yeah.
Aligning your habits with your fundamental intentions in life, not just, I want to lose 3 pounds for Christmas. That's great to do.
Right.
But that's a goal as opposed to living out from a belief system. So I love the samurai community because they're working as one. They're as one. They're for each other, for the good of the people, similar to Balian when he gets given his land. But that's what I love, Paul, the threads between all these stories and all these men's stories that unravel in these transformation processes. There's so many parallels that are unavoidable to notice when you start looking at the characters. He's come from this he can be bought.
Right. Or
he
threatened.
Can be bought or threatened.
Right. That was what determined his behavior was the carrot big enough or was the stick big enough?
Yeah.
But who he was didn't matter.
Yes.
Like what he believed was secondary.
Yes.
But what we have found through our lives is that whenever you make those choices that are against your core being, your heart shatters. It splits because you're living an identity that isn't your own.
Yes. Yeah. And it's a fresh invitation again today, isn't it? It's like just how important it is to be yourself, to be who you are. And out of being who you are is what you do.
And that's when we talk about acting either from victory or from our identity instead of for our identity. Like, I know who I am, so this is what I'm going to do. And we see that with Nathan. You could offer me more money. I'm not going to take it. You could threaten to kill me, and that's not going to dissuade me from walking the path that I believe is right. And when he does that in the movie, before this final battle, a very quick scene, but it's a line that both of us love. Nathan receives his sword. Katsumoto offers it to him before the battle. He's like, you need this. He's wearing the armor of the man that he killed because the family says it would be an honor for us if you would wear this. He had become the kind of man who it would be an honor to be associated with.
Yes.
And as he walked out with the armor, Katsumoto was there. The soldiers, the other samurai were there as he bestowed on him a sword.
You will need this.
What does it say?
I belong to the warrior in whom the old ways have joined the new.
I mean, there's so much in that, public ceremony, that validation to the heart of Nathan. Like you quite well said before, Paul, he's become a man. He's regained his honor. He is a fierce warrior. He does have what it takes. He's recovered his true self again. This sword belongs to you. But I love the intimacy between these two men. Like there's a intimacy between what this sword symbolizes between these two men. It's not just Nathan. It's, Nathan has come from, this new Western world with guns and all sorts of things. And Katsumoto's come from a very ancient, long line of custom and tradition.
Yeah.
And the two have come together and found a way. And I love that, Paul, what that sword symbolizes here, that there is a way that is possible to live today in the new, but we come from somewhere. There's been story before our story. There's been some things that have been learned and tried and tested.
And some things need to be unlearned.
But I get encouragement from that scene and from that inscription. What does it raise for you, that scene?
I love how you recognize that intimacy between those two men. And it reminds me of where Jesus talks about the white stone in Revelation. Mm-hmm. Yes, the sword has an inscription on it, but it's really saying who Nathan is. Mm-hmm. He's like, you are the one, because it says this sword, but it's like, the little sticker, this sword belongs to, with a blank under it. And in this case, it's the man who brings the old and the new together. It's not just the sword that he will battle side by side, but it's a naming, saying, this is who you are. I include you with my brothers, and let's go fight.
I also hadn't noticed this before, Paul, but he's imparting everything that they've learned as a samurai people for generations to this guy. Right. Because it's like, you have taken how we live, how we operate. You're taking that into the world, essentially.
Right. Because he gives his journals off to Simon, played by Peter Pettigrew.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, exactly.
And he's like, oh, I've been looking for books on the samurai, but I couldn't do it. So now he has books about what the core is of who they are. Exactly. It's almost the taking the gospel to the ends of the earth.
Yes. I just wanted to briefly touch on what we noticed about the samurai as well. I noticed, like, yes, inner peace. But one friend said to me maybe a year or two ago, which disrupted me, was, having a settled disposition. These men and women and children were protected by good kings, good men of honor. There was a settled disposition in the people. They were content with their roles and assignments. They were allowed to be, who they are. There's a way things work. What qualities about the samurai stood out to you, Paul?
There was a quote from one of the journal entries where he talks about this devotion to perfecting the practice that's in front of them.
Mm.
And that dedication and that commitment of sort of not going and half-assing it, but saying no. And it doesn't matter what it is. It could have been the bow and arrow. It could have been making bread. It could have been anything, taking care of your children, playing, because there was play. There was laughter and joy. And I think that works into that idea of life in every breath, and that bringing the kairos moment, because it's not perfection for the sake of perfection.
Yes.
Brother Lawrence wrote a very small book called Practicing the Presence of God. And he talks about that. I experience God washing the dishes or sweeping the floors because wherever I am, God goes with me.
Mm-hmm.
And then that statement that gets attributed to Martin Luther, but I don't know that it is, about a Christian shoemaker isn't a Christian shoemaker because he puts crosses on his shoes, but because he makes the best shoes that he can.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a housekeeper, it's not because she writes a Bible verse or whatever whenever she leaves. It's because she does the best job that she can. And we do the best that we're given with the opportunities that we have. And we bring the power of the gospel, the power of Christ into those moments.
Mm-hmm. It shows the power of when you become that kind of, in this case, that kind of man that can be entrusted. And our dear friend Morgan Schneider talks about this a lot, becoming the kind of man that God would gladly entrust more to. You are a pillar in the community and wherever you go.
Yeah.
You can't help. That is an outpouring and overflow of who you've become. That's a natural consequence of becoming. All these stories that we look at, and I desire that. I don't desire just to become this person that people are drawn to or anything. It's more, I want this robust, settled disposition. I want this inner peace, this becoming content in all circumstances. And I have a lot of mileage to go.
Right.
But I'm thankful for conversations like this that invite us to get curious, that invite us to perhaps think about a question that you haven't thought about before. Because there is a lot more available to us now than we've been led to believe.
It's really easy to get caught up in the rush of the mainstream, the big river. And as Dallas Willard says, when somebody asked him what he thought Jesus was like, and he said, relaxed. Jesus was never in a hurry.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it's like to walk around as a man of honor who has a secure grip on who he is, on his identity.
Mm-hmm.
Robert, I know we're bumping up on time for you, so I just wanted to say thank you for joining me and for inviting me back into a conversation with you.
Yeah, I love being with you, Paul. I love where we go in our conversations. So thank you.
All right, guys, before you go, I wanted to encourage you once again to choose the ancient paths. Where is God inviting you to pause, to rest, to find him? Rob mentioned this idea of identity-based habits that he got from the book Atomic Habits, which is a fantastic book. The link's going to be in the resources on the website. But a habit or a behavior will be more successful. It'll be more likely to become part of my routine if it's based on who I am. I won't be successful developing the habit of exercise if my goal is simply to lose weight. But if I want to become a person who is healthy, who is able to walk up the stairs without breathing heavily, then I'll be much more likely to adopt a regular exercise routine. So we apply that principle to a lot of different things. So if I set a goal, let's say to read the Bible through in a year, doing it as a checklist or because that's what's expected or that's what I need to do, probably not going to end up having a good result. And it's just going to be a miserable thing that you quit after like 2 months and you get into Leviticus and you're like, this is boring. But if I say, I want to be the type of man who reads the Bible, I want to be the man who prioritizes my time with God and who meditates on the word, not only will I be more likely to adopt the habit, but I'll probably get a lot more out of the time that I put into the practice of that habit. I'll get a lot more out of it. I won't just rush through it to say I completed the task, but I'll pursue that time with purpose and intention, which will also make it more likely that I'll repeat the behavior. So as we enter this time of Advent and Christmas, and even coming up into 2022, consider what ancient paths to pursue. On our website, I've posted a weekly Advent devotional for each of the Sundays leading up to Christmas. And you guys can find out more about that at themenathemovies.com/Advent. And if you're like, I have no idea what Advent is, I don't know what you're talking about, Morgan Snyder has a great episode discussing this on his Become Good Soil podcast. And I'll put a link for that episode on our website, menathemovies.com/podcast. And finally, I would really recommend putting into practice some pursuit of the ancient paths in the next year. It doesn't have to be going through the Bible. It doesn't have to be this or that. It has to be attainable. If I haven't worked out in 5 years and I say, I'm going to work out every day, that's not going to work. But so you can ask, what's practical? What's available? What can I do? What's sustainable? My plan is to go through the Bible like Rob did this past year with a few of my close friends using the Bible Project. But ask God what he's inviting you into. Ask for wisdom, direction, because those are good things to ask for, because I know that when we ask those things, God's promised that he's going to answer them. And by answer, that means he's going to give us what we ask for. He'll give us wisdom. He'll give us direction. So ask him, what are the ancient paths? What are the good ways? And then you actually have to walk in them. And then you'll find rest for your souls. So I hope you have a great holiday season. And I hope you join us next time here on the Men at the Movies podcast.
Something inside has been awakened. I can no longer be who I was before. But if I am no longer who I was, who am I to be?